Make sending money as cheap as sending a message on WhatsApp. I mean, what a completely wild, ambitious vision, right? But that was exactly the founding vision that birthed the SUI network. It's actually an idea that was forged in the fires of Meta's ambitious, though ultimately shelved, Libra project. See, when the founders left Meta back in 2021, they didn't just tweak the standard blockchain playbook. Nope, they practically threw the whole thing out and started completely from scratch.
So let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly how the team at Miston Labs rebuilt blockchain architecture from the absolute ground up. We're talking about an entirely new kind of network. We're going to explore how SUI doesn't just, record transactions on a ledger, but actually models the physical world. It's super fascinating.
Here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. We'll start with number 1, a new blockchain paradigm. Then number 2, the object-centric model. Number 3, we'll look at next-gen Web3 gaming before pivoting to number 4, rewiring global finance. And finally, number 5, post-quantum and beyond. It's a really packed journey, so let's just get right to it.
Okay, Section 1, a new blockchain paradigm. To really get SUI, we first have to wrap our heads around the massive foundational shift required to build it. Remember, these founders came from a company that scaled to billions of people, and they brought a very specific playbook with them.
The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is how they scale just like Web 2. Historically, blockchains treat block space like this super finite, limited resource, so when demand spikes, fees just skyrocket and regular users get totally priced out. But the SUI founders knew that when, say, Google or Facebook face massive traffic, they don't ration access or hike up prices, they just literally plug in more hardware. And SUI was built the exact same way. By scaling horizontally on a single network, capacity just grows with demand, and fees, they stay totally flat. They purposely avoided splitting everything up into layer 2s or sidechains because, as they say, splitting a network creates a tax you pay forever by ruining composability.
Moving right along to Section 2, the object-centric model. To pull off this massive scale, they actually had to rebuild the Move programming language and totally change how the network's engine room operates.
It is so fascinating to contrast these two ledger models, and I love using a physical world analogy for this. Pretty much every other blockchain out there uses an account-based ledger. You can think of this like your bank balance. It's just tracking a single number under an address. If you want to know the rules of the money, you have to go query an external database. But SUI uses an object-based ledger. It models the world exactly the way it actually works. Think of a physical dollar bill in your pocket right now, or even the chair you're sitting in. Every single asset on SUI is an object that literally carries its own rules, its own history, and its own ownership directly with it, wherever it goes.
And guys, this right here is SUI's absolute superpower. Because objects are independently owned, the network doesn't have to force every single transaction into one massive sequential traffic jam. For simple stuff like sending an object that you uniquely own, you can completely bypass that heavy Byzantine agreement consensus. Instead, SUI uses a consistent broadcast protocol. What does that mean for us? It means independent transactions can be executed massively in parallel, totally simultaneously, without waiting in line. The result is finality that lands in under a single second. It's blazing fast.
So we've got this incredibly fast, object-centric network. Let's see it in action in Section 3. Next-gen Web3 gaming. This is where we really get to see how these objects physically change digital environments.
Think about traditional games for a second. Your assets are basically just lines of code sitting on some central server somewhere, right? But on SUI, game items are dynamic assets. Because they're objects, they can be updated, upgraded, or even composed together entirely on-chain. Imagine an object called a car. It might have a little code field that says is_functioning false until you actually go out, acquire, and attach other distinct objects, like an engine, some tires, maybe a body. Once you snap those all together, the car updates to true. That is what true digital ownership looks like. Your items actually evolve as you play the game.
But hey, let's be real. Not absolutely everything in a game should be tradable. And that brings us to soul-bound assets. These are NFTs that are permanently bound to a specific player's address. You literally cannot transfer or delete them. This is a game changer for developers because they can finally manage in-game reputation, issue battle passes, or grant special event access without players just flipping those privileges on a secondary market and totally wrecking the game's economy.
Let's ground this with a practical thought experiment from the source material. Imagine a game called Arcane Battles. In this game, your NFT playing cards feature dynamic visual wear and tear. If you rely on your most powerful card way too much, the object actually degrades visually right in front of you, and it can eventually be totally destroyed. To fix it, you have to spend Mystic Dust,
which is a secondary closed-loop token you earn by playing. It takes this abstract idea of a dynamic object and turns it into a super tangible strategic mechanic where you're constantly weighing the cost of using your best gear.
All right, Section 4, Rewiring Global Finance. Let's pivot away from digital gaming swords to something with much, much higher stakes. Because here's the crazy part. The exact same object logic that powers that dynamic gaming card applies perfectly to massive institutional capital.
This is literally the multi-trillion-dollar question of the whole industry. How in the world do we bring serious institutional finance on-chain? Historically, there has been one massive wall keeping them away, and it all boils down to privacy.
Think about it. The idea that you pay someone $5 for a coffee and they suddenly get to look through your entire financial history on a public block explorer, that's just nonsensical. Serious finance absolutely requires privacy, and SUI is solving this with confidential transfers. This tech encrypts your balances and transfer amounts directly on the public ledger, so you get consumer-grade privacy by default, but with a clever twist: controlled selective disclosure for auditors and compliance. Because the privacy lives right inside the protocol itself, big institutions can finally put their real positions on-chain without exposing their entire trading playbook to the world.
Which brings us to this tiny, honestly staggering statistic. Right now, less than 1% of all the Bitcoin in existence is currently in any form of productive use. The rest of it, it's just sitting idle in cold storage, generating absolutely zero yield. Why? Well, mostly because institutions are terrified of centralized custodians going bankrupt, and because if they sell their Bitcoin to deploy it, they trigger a massive capital gains tax event. No thanks.
Well, enter the Hashi protocol. This is brilliant. Hashi allows that Bitcoin to stay exactly where it is, safely tucked away in existing institutional custody on the Bitcoin network. It is never sold and it's never wrapped. Because of that, guess what? No taxable event triggered. Instead, the lending happens decentralized, directly on SUI, backed by an on-chain insurance fund. It completely removes the trust constraint and the tax constraint, which could unlock literally billions of dollars in idle Bitcoin to finally start earning yield.
And this brings our entire narrative full circle, right back to our opening quote. SUI recently launched gasless stablecoin transfers. To pull this off, they did their biggest architectural upgrade ever, creating this hybrid ledger with address balances. So now, simple fungible assets like stablecoins get to enjoy the ease of an account model, while everything else keeps the incredible power of the object model. The final result? You can send stablecoins peer-to-peer with literally zero gas fees. They truly, actually made moving money as easy as sending a text message. We've covered a lot with gaming and finance, but let's look at the horizon in Section 5, post-quantum and beyond, because we have to ask, what is the ultimate boss fight for this entire industry?
The biggest existential threat facing the whole crypto space is the eventual arrival of a quantum computer powerful enough to just shatter today's cryptographic signatures. Every serious cryptographer knows it's coming. The only real debate is exactly when. And if the cryptography breaks, the entire concept of blockchain ownership completely collapses. Game over. But the wild thing is, SUI's architecture was designed with this exact bet in mind right from day one. Their chief cryptographer actually shipped crypto's first stateless post-quantum signatures into production way back in 2017. And looking ahead to 2026, post-quantum cryptography is already slated to be running on the SUI testnet with a full mainnet migration planned after that. So while other chains are going to have to scramble and stretch their old cryptography with bigger keys just to buy a little time, SUI's migrating to post-quantum safety literally years ahead of the competition.
We've seen how Web 2-style horizontal scaling, a super unique object-centric model, and robust post-quantum security all combine to create this network that's capable of rewiring everything. We're talking dynamic gaming assets to global institutional finance. So, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder today. If every digital asset out there, whether it's a digital sword or a literal dollar bill, can carry its own rules, its own history, and its own yield directly within it, what will you build with it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep learning.